Blue Wire.
What is up, Nets fans? Welcome to Brooklyn Buzz. I'm Nick Fay. With me, as always, Jack Manuel. And Jack, we're talking about a Nets win today, 127-97 over the Timberwolves. How are we feeling, Jack?
Yeah, Nets win's always good, Nick. Not necessarily the best circumstances to get it in, but you take the W.
Exactly. Obviously, there's a ton of stuff going on in the world right now. We're going to touch on that a little bit later. But as always, you can find the Brooklyn Buzz on all streaming platforms. But where would you like to start today, Jack?
Nick, I want to start with this first half. I woke up, basically, turned my phone on, and
did you even know there was a game, Jack? Like, because it got rescheduled while you were sleeping.
The rescheduling. I mean, I had in my head, I'm like going to bed. I'm like, they're going to reschedule the game. By the time I'm like, and the game started at 6 a.m. my time. I woke up at about 7:30, 8 a.m. It was around halftime or whatever. And the Nets are up 73 to 52. I'm like, oh, okay, this is a decent start, but the rescheduling is obviously putting a lot of things in whack that we'll probably have a discussion about in terms of Kevin Durant playing a back-to-back against the Philadelphia 76ers. Is Kyrie Irving going to come back and the decision to do so on both regards. But yeah, it was a weird decision by the NBA, but ultimately they just want to get these 72 games over and done with. I don't necessarily agree with it. I send just a lot of thoughts and well wishes to everyone who has been affected by yet another absolute fucking tragedy that is continuing to happen. And it's not even a tragedy because it's just so goddamn consistent that it's hard to sort of fully grasp the fact that these things still keep happening. But ultimately, it's almost not a surprise at the same time as well.
Yeah, obviously, in the trial going on for George Floyd is not even that far away of this recent incident. Obviously, the killing of Dante Wright is what we're talking about, and it's just really, really upsetting. And like you said, Jack, it's not a tragedy because it's like something that consistently happens on a regular basis. And we've had all these protests and all these changes, but the things still keep happening. And it's like, yeah, we're talking about it right now, but then we're going to go and live on our life. And then there's actual change is still not going to happen. And we heard Steve Nash talk about it a lot before today's game. And I think he does a great job of kind of expanding on that and kind of almost showing like a player's perspective, especially as like a white male, and what it means and like what you can do and how you can express like emotion towards it, and how it just like is still just like, it's hard to grasp. And I know you and I talk about it sometimes, and because you live in Australia, it's a little bit different. And like, you're just having that outside view and how it's just like so crazy that this thing is consistently happening in a country like this regularly, what it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, look, to be honest, and I don't mean to come at from a narrow-minded and shallow perspective, but we had one mass shooting in Australia, and it took a Liberal government, which is the same as a Republican government, just that incident to happen for us to change our gun laws. And we hadn't had any sort of mass shootings, any sort of killings in relation to guns of that extreme of a nature since that point. I think it was in the mid-90s, just when I was sort of born. And it just makes, look, it just makes talking about basketball seem a little bit hollow. And despite the fact that it is a good outlet and a good distraction, sometimes it's not good to be distracted. And I think Steve Nash made a really good point in the saying that, like, look, ultimately, is us not playing this game, sort of what the Milwaukee Bucks did. And it was a good decision by the NBA to postpone, obviously, from last night. Is it really going to change anything? And like this regular season matchup, or is it going to get lost in the waves of so many other probably important things that are happening in terms of the protesting that is justly happening and should be happening, whether it's property damage or not, don't really give a shit. In all honesty, Nick, this basketball game, while there's a lot to take from it, and we can probably dive into it in a little bit, it's just like just this season alone, we've spoken about so many instances of systemic oppression and just police killings and just general overall injustice that I can't imagine what it is like to be a person that is of color, that has to go through that on a daily basis, that just because of how they were born is born into a system that is automatically against them. We are somehow got the genetic lottery and were born as white males, and we happen to just be born with those advantages, which is just, it's just not fair. The general structure of society shouldn't be naturally dehumanizing, and it just happens to be. And it's not to say that it doesn't happen in Australia either, because that happens to Indigenous Australians quite a bit. And it's something that, I think doesn't get enough coverage of down here in Australia. The national media does a really good job of covering it up. But in all honesty, Nick, I find it hard to fathom. But at the same time, like you sort of alluded to, it just keeps happening, and I can't understand how nothing has changed, and how it's just like these BS excuses keeps coming out, and how the system is just so naturally skewed to the oppressors. It just, I don't know. I'm probably waffling on a little bit, but I think sometimes having this outlet, and hopefully, if people don't like what we say, then sorry, unsubscribe to it, because this is a podcast that we naturally have a platform, and I think with our platform, if we weren't to discuss these sort of things and these sort of absolute atrocities, it would be doing an injustice to the little voice that we do happen to have.
Especially in the league in which we talk about on a regular basis. You know what I mean? It would just be insensitive and stupid. And like you said, it kind of takes something away from the game. And that's fine, because there's issues that are bigger than basketball. And like, hey, bad things are going to happen. Mistakes are going to happen. People are going to do things that are wrong. But at the end of the day, there has to be some type of accountability. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the most upsetting things in the whole situation is, like, it's so hard for them to just be like, you know what, that they just screwed up. They just fucked up that situation, and now they have to go to prison. And I think that's consistently what's making people so upset. It's like, oh, if I'm a citizen or I'm a person of color and I do this, I make a mistake, now there might be a chance that I die. But a police officer does something and they mistakenly grab their taser or they grab their gun instead of their taser, and now they're not going to prison. Like, that's a life-changing mistake for somebody, and that's just unacceptable. Like, there has to be accountability in 2021 when there's like cams everywhere. Everything is documented. You know what I mean? And to just allow things to kind of continue to happen and nothing being done about it it's just crazy. It just doesn't make sense. It's like barbaric to an extent.
It's disheartening, to say, at the very, very least. And the whole argument of it's just one bad apple, and it's just like, well, do you guys know what the actual whole metaphor is? It's one bad apple can spoil a bunch, and there's certain jobs where you can't have bad apples in. If a pilot, if there's a bad apple in the piloting in the auto industry, in the aviation industry, then people die. And if there are certain things where it's just like, you can't have bad apples. I'm sorry. Yep. They all have to be perfect, and there all has to be a standard of accountability and standards that just can't be slipped from. But I think that the standards that have been embedded for many, many millennia in America and around the world, it's structurally inadequate to an extent that I don't think even we understand, Nick.
Yeah, I 100% agree, Jack. And obviously there was other incidents this week, and I think, I don't want to say it's funny, but it's like they talk all this trash when Kaepernick took a knee and respect our troops and all this stuff. And then you have the police brutality towards an active member of the military of color. So it just goes to show you, it's just like they're always changing the rules and trying to give an excuse that fits for their side. But like you said, Jack, it's these ideas that they've had over time and that they carry on instead of making the changes and being accountable and trying to listen, understand, and be like, you know what? We're bad. We're doing things wrong here. We need to change. They just continue to do things the way that they want to do them, and that benefits them. And it's like you said, we were talking before we hopped on another podcast, and we were saying how like the system is so messed up. The system isn't really messed up. It's just rigged to benefit one specific party, being white males or police officers, or just in that situation, everybody else kind of gets screwed.
I think the worst thing, Nick, is that we know what probably some of the solutions are.
Yeah.
It's just that the people in power continue to just ignore them, and just actively ignore them. Not just ignore them out of ignorance. The whole ignorance.
But get upset about property damage.
Yeah, and it's just like, what are the priorities here? Like in terms of just like, we're all human beings. It doesn't matter who we are and what we've come from. Just a natural care for your fellow man, and sort of just like you said, it's all just skewed. And it's just like and what probably is what more infuriating is the fact that, like I said, we know what some of the solutions are, what some of the answers are to solving these structural inadequacies that are just killing people. Like, people are fucking dying. And it just makes no sense why nothing is being changed. It's just like, well, I'm a white dude. I'm 80 years old. I'm going to die soon. And then my son's probably going to take over from me as in some position of power. It doesn't necessarily affect me. And it's just that level of selfishness and active ignorance and stupidity is mind-bogglingly staggering. It doesn't make sense. And it's infuriating. and I can't imagine, and it's just something, Nick, that I get angry about on a daily basis, and I can't imagine the amount of fury that goes through the hearts of people that have to actively endure this. If you are a family member, a friend, or whatever,
Or just a person of color living in this country and just seeing it happen to, it could be you, it could be somebody and just like it's always a constant excuse of like, oh, well, they resisted, or some like stupid excuse that really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, even if somebody resists arrest, unless they're trying to like light up an entire place and they have a gun or an active shooter or something, you still shouldn't be trying to shoot them. And I always have the same idea when it comes to police officers. Like, civilians never wake up and be like, you know what, today I'm going to risk my life. When you're a cop, every day you go into work, you're risking your life. That's part of the job. That's why you signed up for the job, and you know that as a risk. So at the end of the day, like, it's terrible, and I'm not saying I wish cops die or anything like that, but it's a more likely scenario for a cop to wake up and have to deal with some type of incident like that than a civilian having to wake up for that, especially when it's a traffic stop or a warrant or something minor. We're not talking about like life-changing crimes. Like, we're not talking about murder or rape or anything like that. We're talking about some of the lowest level crimes that you possibly could have.
Yeah, misdemeanors, all this level of BS where it's just like, if you or I have kids one day and, we don't have to have these conversations to our kids where it's just like, make sure your hoodie's down, make sure all these little things. And it's just like, it breaks your heart, Nick. It breaks your heart. And as people just know that, Nick and I try to be somewhat of allies in any way that we sort of can and use our voice to the extent that we sort of can. It's saddening and saddening, infuriating. The complex level of emotions right now, I'm not necessarily probably expressing in the most eloquent way, but sometimes you just got to get it out there, and our hearts go out to all the people that have to deal through this on a daily, hourly, minute by minute, day by day basis.
And all the people who aren't going to get the news headline, or all the people that are just going to deal with it and it's going to get kind of washed under the rug living in a small town or something like that, or just, the cop is always going to kind of get the benefit. So like you said, Jack, it's extremely upsetting. And I'm sure it's even more upsetting to other people as well, just considering like that's the situation they have to deal with on a regular basis. And even the players in the game today, I was really curious to kind of see what the energy level would be like. Obviously, we had a lot of guys missing the games for other reasons that I don't think were related to that, which if they did want to sit out for that reason, that would be perfectly fine. But I was kind of curious to see like what would the vibe be like in the game. And you really didn't see like necessarily a ton of joy from guys on a regular basis in this one.
No, at the end of the day, this is a job. Like, basketball is a job. As much as like a lot of people say, this is an outlet for me. It's joy. I feel the most like myself. There's times where it's just like you're numb to the human experience, and that includes being, some of these guys are lucky to play basketball. They get the opportunity to express themselves in that way. Kyrie Irving's mentioned that on a pretty consistent basis. I did really like that both teams wearing the black t-shirts. It says with liberty and justice for all, underline. That was a really nice statement. The NBA players always do a great job at highlighting their voices, using their voices. Probably more so than the people that should be using their fucking voices, to be honest. We shouldn't be relying on the people who are being oppressed, the people who are being systematically unjustified. But unfortunately, they have a level of leadership, a level of intelligence that the people that should have it, unfortunately, don't have. But yeah, shout out to the Brooklyn Nets, the Minnesota Timberwolves, and so many other great NBA players that continue to use their voice in a way that is that when it's amplified, it really does make a difference. And there's a reason why we love this league, Nick. And part of it is because we love the way that these guys play basketball, but it's also because of the character and nature of these really, really upstanding young men.
Yep, Jack, obviously you love the players on the court, but a lot of these guys we love off the court for the different things they do or the impact they can have in the community. But Jack, I guess let's jump into this game. And obviously it wasn't necessarily much of a game. Like I mentioned earlier, the Nets won 127-97, out to a double-digit lead pretty early on. The Timberwolves made a nice little 8-0 run to end the first quarter. You thought, hey, maybe this will be a competitive one. Not really. The Nets pretty much went on to dominate them the rest of this game, and it was over by the third quarter when the Nets were up by 30+.
And look, it's a good thing, Nick. You want to sort of it's been few and far between. I mean, it's only a couple of games ago where the Nets did have this sort of performance incident against Pelicans, but these are the sort of performances that the good teams do have. And obviously, the Nets don't have Kyrie Irving, who's away for personal reasons, and James Harden, who's still recovering from his hamstring injury. Kevin Durant did play. I think that the big question heading into this matchup, if and when it was going to happen, is Kevin Durant going to play this game? Is he going to play the Philadelphia game tomorrow? And we saw him play tonight, and boy, did he play, Nick. The way that Kevin Durant just plays with a level of ease and showcases his talents. There are a few players who just make the game look as easy as Kevin Durant. Maybe Joe Harris, though.
Honestly, you watch Kevin Durant play and you kind of ask yourself, is he fazed by this defense? Like, is this even bothering him at all? Is this like pushing him off his spots or his motion? Like Jaden McDaniels, who's a really long defender, was up in his face a couple times, and KD really kind of almost ignored him to an extent. We're talking about a 31-point game, an 11 of 15 from the field, 4 of 6 from 3, 5 of 6 from the free throw line, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, got those turnovers down to 4. Just a really extremely efficient game. And it just felt super easy for Kevin Durant. I mean, he just looked very, very good out there. Obviously, some of that being Minnesota, one of the worst teams in the league. But it's great to just see him look so fluid after such a long time off.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to discuss the Shannon Sharp feud a little bit later on, Nick, because this is one that I'm sure Shannon will have to talk about.
He's dropping guys on Twitter and on the court.
I mean, I don't know what he's getting. Was this a better Twitter night for Kevin Durant, or was it a better basketball night? No, I think ultimately his basketball prowess is something that, we've I've had discussions just about this season overall, Nick, and I was talking to Matt Nakew, who's been a co-host of this pod once and a couple of times, sorry, and we're sort of talking about, again, just like the season has been so jumbled up and so ad hoc in terms of the amount of injuries that happen, the condensed nature of it all. I think we just need to keep taking joy in the moments. And I've sort of said enjoy the journey and stuff. Kevin Durant's incredible skill tonight and his incredible shot making. He was a good passer as well. I liked how him and DJ, they have a really nice chemistry. It was good to see DJ back. We'll get to him in a little bit. So I'm going to keep enjoying game by game, Nick, whether it's a win or a loss. I'm not going to take the Kevin Durant highlights for granted, nor am I going to take those Joe Harris highlights for granted either.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of efficiency, too, this is one of his best games of the season. Like I said, Minnesota is not great. Karl-Anthony Towns didn't play. Malik Beasley didn't play as well. But still, seeing Kevin Durant back in the court playing at this level, and there was also a couple flash defensive plays where you're like, damn, like the Nets really can use this type of defense. And when he gets back in full rhythm and fully conditioned, and they have some different rotations out there, especially the front court of Jeff Green, KD, and Nick Claxton, I think there's some real defensive potential there.
Well, that was the lineup that we've sort of alluded to and been hoping for a while, Nick. Clax finally got the start. Nets Twitter erupted. Chris Chioza got the start, and Nets Twitter didn't necessarily show the level of eruption that we wanted them to, but I saw a really cool nickname on Twitter. And you might need to put a little bit of a beat button on me for this one, but what's the nickname for the duo of Nick Claxton and Chris Chioza? They're like hot cheese, and I'm just like, okay, kind of like that, kind of like it. But yeah, it was. The starters did their job, Nick. All of them were incredible in terms of their plus minus. And that second quarter, they really sort of extended the lead and such as well. And Chris Chioza sort of level of just steadiness that was pretty solid. And again, Joe Harris, Nick, another sensational game from Mr. Buckets.
Yeah, Joe looked really comfortable out there, especially kind of getting in the paint, playmaking a little bit in this one, especially when guys were out. Chris Chioza left this game starting in the third quarter. So it was really like playmaking from a Joe Harris, from a Bruce Brown, obviously a Kevin Durant, Landry Shamet. But Joe was super solid, super efficient, 8 of 12 from the field, 5 of 8 from 3, 2 of 2 from the free throw line, 23 points, 2 steals, 3 assists, 3 rebounds. Did have 3 turnovers, but that's okay because he picked up a little bit more of the load than he normally does. And he looked pretty comfortable out there. And I think guys are starting to understand how Joe plays. And some of the passes, there was one pass he made to Bruce Brown in this one where I was impressed.
Was that off the cut?
Yeah, it was off he drove himself, and then it was like kind of a drop-off pass to Bruce Brown, who was behind him. And it was just kind of like, okay, that's a great pass, but it's also a great feel for your teammate, who obviously he's developed with this season.
Yeah, I think that Joe's really good at those in close passes. I think he has a really good spatial awareness at those points. Sometimes when the game is a bit wider out and a bit more expansive, it can be a little bit tougher for him, as we see in sort of like closing game situations. But this is one of the best games of the season for Joe. And, obviously 5-8 from 3 is the number that everyone's going to look at. But as I sort of put out on Twitter, Joe more than a shooter Harris. He's been sensational all season. And, when the times have come for him to sort of step up when we need him, there have been few moments where he hasn't. And obviously in the absence of some of our superstars and basically him being the second most talented offensive starter, you can make an argument for Jeff Green, but I think Joe Harris probably has a little bit more in the tank now at this stage of his career. He, again, stepped up when it mattered, and it was him and Kevin Durant that really sort of got us the ascendancy on that offensive side of the ball. And Joe Harris also did have 2 steals as well. So, again, showing a level of defensive acumen that I think few people will give him credit for.
Yeah, really, like you said, Jack, one of his best games this season, really efficient, played well. Obviously, Minnesota not being great, but still give him credit. But let's talk about the other sharpshooter on the team, Landry Shamet. 19 points, 7 of 12 from the field, 5 of 9 from 3, 5 rebounds, and he had 5 assists. We saw a little bit more point guard Shamet in this game.
This is a game where I think suited Landry Shamet in terms of the matchup. Obviously, you got D'Angelo Russell on the other team, Anthony Edwards, these sort of guys, and the backup guards and the depth in the rotation for the Minnesota Timberwolves isn't necessarily great. So it allows Landry Shamet to showcase some of the skills that he's had, in Los Angeles, probably not so much in Philadelphia, but definitely in college where he did play point guard as well. And it's a luxury to have a Joe Harris and a Landry Shamet on the same team. Like, how many other teams?
Oh, sorry, Jack, to cut you off. I was just going to say they had some nice chemistry together in this game, too.
How many teams can boast that, Nick? 2 guys that shoot reliably 40% or above. I think we've almost forgotten about his slow start, because what he has done since, he's been shooting like 45% from 3 since that moment, and proven to himself and proven to this team and proven to the fans that Landry Shamet deserves to play meaningful minutes for the Brooklyn Nets. And if he continues to play like this, Nick, it's going to be a goddamn shootout. So like, watching pop a shot, and it's just like it just doesn't miss. And both of these guys played awesome tonight, and Landry Shamet deserves a lot of credit for the form that he is now in. And again, showing no signs of rust despite coming off an ankle injury just a couple of games ago. He's showed a level of just impact automatically coming back to this team. And I think the absence of Kyrie Irving and James Harden and Kevin Durant at times almost helps him, because it allows him to get some extended minutes out there, because he's an important part of this rotation, especially in this regular season.
Yeah, I think post All-Star break, he's been really good. His confidence has kind of been at a different level with the shooting. You're starting to see some of those off-balance threes, and they're going down. And I think, like you said, Jack, it's a nice opportunity for him to handle the ball a little bit more. And I think that could be a benefit for him moving forward, just kind of getting some of those touches in games, because at times he hasn't necessarily looked super comfortable being the point guard. Today, he did do that. Obviously, the talent wasn't necessarily there on the other team, but that's a building block moving forward. And like you said, Jack, having a Shamet, having a Harris, that's another offensive tool for this team. Like, you're already putting out a ton of great offensive lineups between, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, James Harden, Blake Griffin, and Joe Harris. Now you have another tool. Is like, hey, we're going to put 2 elite floor spacers on the floor, and that could help, run our offense or our second unit for the time being. So it just gives Steve Nash another option, another kind of interesting way to create offense.
Yeah, and I think options matter more in the regular season as well, Nick. And I think the Nets are still going for that 1 seed. Despite the fact that we saw Kevin Durant play tonight, and people were like, well, is he going to play tomorrow back-to-back? We can have a discussion about that, I guess, at some point. But ultimately, in the regular season, that's when the depth in the rotation does matter. We've seen this season, and, we said in the preseason that it's probably going to matter more than ever in terms of the condensed nature of the season. The Nets have been lucky enough to had a decent bill of health, haven't necessarily had extended amounts of guys out. Obviously, that has been the case at certain points, but that, the injuries haven't necessarily been severe or long-term, thankfully, and knock on wood. But in all honesty, Landry Shamet's playing some really great basketball, and this is what we expected of him, and he's maybe even exceeding those expectations in a way.
Yeah, I think in the second half, you kind of have a first half expectation off the way he played, and then he started to bounce back. But then through the second half, you're starting to see, maybe a little different element to his game. And like you said, it helps more in the regular season. But if there's an injury in a playoff series or someone gets in foul trouble, this is a guy you feel a little bit more confident relying on, or having to play maybe a bigger portion of minutes than anticipated.
Yeah, it's confidence, Nick. Confidence in the rotation, confidence in his own individual game. Good things to come for Landry Shamet.
I think let's talk a little Nick Claxton, like you mentioned. Jack got his first career start. Not necessarily an eye-popping game for him from the box score perspective. 6 points, 3 of 4 from the field, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, 1 block, 0 turnovers. But I feel like defensively, his switchability is such a huge aspect and really kind of just slowing down other teams' offenses. And I will give Anthony Edwards some credit. He did catch Nick Claxton a couple times, forcing him to result in fouls and free throws.
I'll see. Mark Jackson was right, wasn't he, Nick? It's a bad matchup with Nicholas Claxton's on the perimeter. Man, if you're talking about, you haven't watched Nets basketball, then look straight to Mark frickin' Jackson and all the Lakers fans that were agreeing with him. Look, ultimately, Nick Claxton's going to get cooked a couple of times, like any other player in the NBA is, by a guy who is an athlete as talented and gifted as Anthony Edwards is, and we discussed that on the outlet quite a bit, but I'd really loved, especially the defense to offense play, and in the open court. Yep. How many big men feel as comfortable running the open court in transition, as much as Nicholas Claxton is? That was a real highlight play. Again, his rebounding is continuing to stay steady and really high, even when he's not impacting the box score as much. And again, steals and blocks and assists. He is a comfortable player. There aren't many things where it's just like, oh man, I don't know, unless it's like, Joel Embiid posting him up or Anthony Davis or Nikola Jokic posting him up. That might be the only thing where I don't feel comfortable Nicholas Claxton defensively or offensively. Maybe at the 3-point line too, actually.
Yeah, I think offensively, too, he's getting a little bit more comfortable down there, starting to see that hook shot where he's not rushing as much. He's kind of like, okay, I'm going to quicker than this guy, or I'm just going to take a step outside, and that's still within my range. And there's also a play in this game, I believe it was first couple minutes of the game, where he made a great read off ball and setting a screen for Joe Harris, like a step before the pass even happened. And those are the type of screens that are going to really help you get minutes in the playoffs, because those are kind of those game-changing plays. And obviously, like you mentioned, Jack, the play in transition in which he took it coast to coast. It's always fun watching somebody his size do that type of thing.
Oh, he's an absolutely gorgeous man for so many different reasons, and the Pacific Post-Ups gave him a lot of love as well. TG Network, and they gave me a nice introduction talking about Clack City himself too. And I think that off-ball screen, Nick, I think we can probably naturally transitions us to talking about DeAndre Jordan. That's something that DJ has done quite consistently for this Brooklyn Nets team and across his career. In tandem with JJ Redick and other shooters, and to see Clax learning that, and I think taking on that, because that's one thing that I've said of him early in his career that he needs to get better at, is his screening. And that's the same thing I said about Jared Allen, funnily enough, and then he got really good at that too. If that continues to be a wrinkle to his game, because ultimately as a big man, you need to do the little things that open up the spaces for your shooters, for your offensive masterminds like Joe Harris, like Kevin Durant, like these sort of guys. Pin down, screens, open whatever, pick and rolls. So I think that's a nice little wrinkle to his game that is improving. And again, that DJ has done for a very, very long time.
Yeah, and I think it provides, value. It gives you another reason for Steve Nash to play Nick Claxton or start Nick Claxton or play him big minutes. If now he's not only having a positive defensive impact, but he's doing the small things offensively, now it just kind of makes the Nets that much more difficult. But you mentioned DJ, Jack, and we saw him play for the first time in, since the LaMarcus Aldridge, signing, since his debut, I think, against Charlotte is the first time we saw DJ on the floor. 13 points, 5 of 5 from the field, 7 rebounds, 2 assists. Not a bad game. I thought he had some decent energy in this one, some of it being against the Timberwolves and them not really being able to exploit him, but it wasn't a bad performance from DeAndre Jordan.
I don't think it wasn't just a bad performance. I thought it was a good perforance from DJ. And, if you're judging by his standards, it was very good. Yeah. So, I think that, people don't, whether it's fans or Twitterati or whatever the hell you want to call it, people aren't really happy changing in their own mind. It's just like, DJ's out of the rotation, keep him out of there. Where it's just like, if you give him minutes, give credit where credit is due. DJ can be good in certain matchups. He can be good in certain lineups. He might be needed and important against the Philadelphia 76ers if LaMarcus Aldridge is still out, because we've seen him go well against some of the bigger dudes in the league, and his post defense is probably his best defensive skill right now, unlike Nicholas Claxton, who is, that switchy sort of dude who has immense versatility on that end of the floor. But DJ showed some nice, that lob threat. His rebounding was good. He's always a really nice little elbow hub. Love his screening. I've always been a big fan of that. I think it's an underrated thing, unless you're a Rudy Gobert fan. Not many people tend to know that sort of thing. And again, I think that this shows you that I said it. Can't remember if it was on the last pod, Nick, or a pod before, or on JBT, or on the outlet, or wherever the hell it was on the OTG network. But I literally said that DeAndre Jordan is going to have a role for this team. and he has shown it tonight, and he has proven that, you know, you sort of chatted about it with Landry Shamet as another weapon, another guy coming off the bench or whatever. DJ has shown that, you know, he can produce at points where needed for this team, and that front court versatility, I think, is helpful.
Yeah, he definitely provides a different type of physicality, and even at his age, he still plays a little bit above the rim. He had a couple nice dunks in this game where you can hit him with that drop-off pass, and all he needs is kind of 2 steps inside, and he's throwing it down. You know, we saw him play a little bit with Blake Griffin. Spacing's not necessarily ideal on that because Blake kind of still likes to get into the post-up game occasionally. But you saw those two connect on a nice, you know, touchdown pass today. So, you know, DJ playing a little bit more energy, kind of playing within his role and playing a small chunk of minutes. That's when you're going to get the best out of him. And it'll be interesting to see if he does play against Philadelphia, which I almost kind of assume he will because I have a feeling that Aldridge might still be out.
Yeah, it's possible, Nick, and I think we've heard that Kyrie Irving is more than likely going to be out. Andrew Shamet has said that. I mean, Steve Nash didn't confirm it, but I doubt he'll be back, and Kevin Durant might not play. It might be the bubble nets taking on the Philadelphia 76ers. We'll have to wait and see how it all does pan out. But yeah, I think that, and I've said this, you know, Steve Nash needs to continue experimenting and continuing to find out what he has in his guys, whether you are a 10, 12-year vet in DeAndre Jordan, or whether you are a second-year player, Nicholas Claxton. You know, what can you do for us against teams where it is going to matter? You know, and the game ultimately, if the Nets don't have their superstars there and healthy, the best thing that you can get out of it is understanding, okay, can Clax play hold up against a Joel Embiid? Can DJ hold up against a Joel Embiid? Can Blake Griffin hold up against a Joel Embiid? I think that's probably going to be the biggest thing about that matchup, Nick, if we don't have any of our superstars healthy.
Yeah, it definitely is going to be something to keep an eye on. But obviously, I think it's always kind of hard when you are missing other pieces because, like, how does one aspect, you know, outweigh another aspect? You know, if you're making them work super hard on the defensive end, is your offense going to be a little bit worse? And so, like you said, Jack, it's really interesting, and that's going to be kind of a big component of the game against Philadelphia.
Definitely. It's going to be a matchup that I'm sure we'll be watching very, very intently. If not the casual fans won't be watching as much. But yeah, I want to show some love as well to Bruce Brown, Nick. The box score doesn't look as flattering in terms of the 4 of 15 from the field, but what does look flattering is 12 rebounds, including 4 offensive rebounds. Again, the assists, I thought that the team ball movement, even if Ben Simmons likes to say there's only one ball out there, the Brooklyn Nets seem to do pretty goddamn well in terms of their ball movement and their assists. Again, 3 steals as well and a block. Bruce Brown did a really good job tonight against the Timberwolves.
Yeah, obviously the shot was a little bit off. I thought there was a couple of times he could have got foul calls there, but like you said, Jack, 12 rebounds, 4 offensive. You know, you have the 3 assists, you have the 3 steals. I also think he did a nice job on D'Angelo Russell. D'Lo started the game pretty hot, 5 of 5. Bruce Brown kind of shut that shit down in the second quarter, picked his pocket once for a nice little steal and dunk. So you just love the energy Bruce Brown plays with, especially on a night like tonight where the Nets aren't fully, you know, stacked up and they don't have their offensive talent, and even missing, you know, a point guard for the second half of this game. Bruce Brown came through and gave you just kind of that spark that you need sometimes that kind of ignites some of these blowout wins.
It can, you know, it's sort of like, you know, shows the level of, like, you know, the starters do their job, they build a lead or whatever, and you got Bruce Brown coming off the bench, and it's just like maintaining it and increasing that ascendancy. He's continuing to show his value no matter what he does. You know, he's been asked to start for this team consistently. He's come off the bench for this team. It's almost like a similar. It reminds me of Spencer Dinwiddie in seasons past about, you know, his role changing in terms of starter, bench. But his game doesn't change, you know. And sometimes, you know, he's not given the greatest opportunities to succeed. The matchup not going to be great in terms of the opponent. He might not be in lineups out there, whether it's, you know, next to a DJ or whatever, like we've sort of spoken about before. But Bruce Brown continues to show his value, and he has immense value for the Brooklyn Nets. That's for sure, Nick.
Yeah, and I think it's just kind of understanding that too, Jack, and like where he can excel in those different situations. And it's been great to kind of watch him grow into this role from where it was in the beginning of the season, where he wasn't even getting minutes, or if it was just kind of garbage time.
Yeah, he's turned a fringe rotation player to being a short role player, a small ball center alongside James Harden, to being, you know, a makeshift starter, to being an off the bench energy dude. He's shown a level of versatility in his role that you want out of the role players. No matter what changes, you don't want your game or impact to change. And Bruce Brown has shown a level of composure and poise to continue doing that.
100%. Jack, I guess let's talk a little Blake Griffin. Not a great stat line for him. 0 of 6 from the field, 0 of 4 from 3, 4 of 4 from the free throw line. Did have 4 rebounds and 2 assists. Had a couple nice hustle plays out there too. So, Blake didn't shoot well offensively. I don't think his shot was really feeling it, but you still feel his impact out there, and he kind of gives him at times kind of like just another steadying force offensively with the guards being out.
Yeah, I think just as a vet, Blake Griffin just knows how to make the right plays. The rebounding's still okay. He did have a steal, did have a couple of dimes, as you alluded to, some decent hustle plays that you don't necessarily expect from the superstar. But Blake Griffin is buying more into this role off the bench and this vet sort of role. And I think he's doing a really good job of that. And it was cool to sort of see, like you mentioned before, that Blake to GJ sort of pass, the old school sort of Lob City revived in a way. So I think Blake's going to continue to have some semblance of a role. It's going to be against, the more meaningful matchups that we'll be looking at. Okay, what does Blake do here? Does that three ball start to fall? What is he like as an elbow hub? What is he like defensively? We've seen some decent points of the fact that he can play a small ball 5 sparingly. Obviously, in certain moments, it probably doesn't work as well as Jeff Green at that small ball 5 or Nicholas Claxton, as you're probably more of, a reliable 5 force. But yeah, in all honesty, this wasn't the greatest game from Blake Griffin, but I think the stats don't do him justice either.
Yeah, I think one thing that'll help him get minutes come postseason time is like he does make those hustle plays. He does provide that toughness and that physicality, and that's just something you need in a playoff series. Even if he's playing, 8 minutes, he comes in, knocks down a 3, draws a charge, gets a couple rebounds. Like that's what you're kind of looking for in this situation. Like you said, Jack, it feels like he has a good understanding of who he is on this team.
And and you can't ask for anything more than that. And LaMarcus Aldridge has done a good job of that as well. Hopefully we get him back for the Philadelphia matchup because, healthy bodies is just what matters more than anything in today's NBA, especially with the condensed nature of what's been going on in the regular season. But yeah, overall, just a really good, dominant sort of performance from the Brooklyn Nets. Get this one in the win bank, and hopefully, it gets you closer to that goal of the 1 seed. It might not, obviously, because if the Sixers win, they get the season matchup in terms of that. But if the Brooklyn Nets continue the way that they've been playing, they've got a decent schedule. The games are spaced out well enough, and their run home, as we sort of alluded to after the All-Star break, is the second easiest behind only the Utah Jazz.
And obviously that guy, Kevin Durant being back in uniform always kind of helps. It looks like Kyrie should be back. It's just personal reasons. So I expect him to be fully healthy when he's back, maybe get some extra rest. And, later, as soon as it is, James Harden could be back next week. And I think also, Jack, just to touch on this game on one more point, it's just such a big difference when the Nets shoot well from 3. And obviously some of that's the Timberwolves defense being terrible, but they were just knocking down threes tonight. The rhythm was there offensively, shooting 41%. In that Laker game, I think they shot somewhere in the 20s. So it's just like that
29
is such,
or something.
Yeah, that's such a big component for the Nets. And just seeing the offense run and kind of having an idea where guys are supposed to be and what they're doing out there. And at different points this season, you haven't always seen that because guys have been in and out of the lineup, and obviously missing point guards can make that difficult, especially, when a guy like James Harden is out, who's been running the show for the team for the last 2 months.
Yeah, it shows the level of just the IQ and savviness of this team to just be able to adjust to no matter what is out there, we're going to perform. And, there aren't many teams that can miss 2 of their 3 best players, some depth pieces as well, and still go out and beat, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have been feisty of late, who have been in some good form. And obviously they're missing their best player too in Karl Anthony Towns, and our thoughts and love go out to him as well on a pretty tough time for him. But we wish him all the best, in our thoughts and all the love in the world go to Karl Anthony Towns and his family. And again, just to finish off, I guess, as well, Nick, to maybe not something that fans want us to speak about, but TLC tonight, it was TLC sort of things. 4 of 11 from the field, 9 points, 1 of 5 from 3. Did have 6 boards, did have a dime as well, but he just doesn't have a level of confidence in his game. And Steve Nash had a really good quote the other day in terms of just supporting him psychologically and supporting him in that sort of manner. And I think ultimately he doesn't necessarily have that confidence right now. And I think that sometimes you just need one game to turn it all around. It was a shame that it wasn't today where he could sort of turn around that form.
Yeah, the 3-point shot, it feels like he's in his head. The release is starting to look different at different points, some of them just being so far off. But hopefully, like you said, he can find that rhythm. Not that he's an important piece for the postseason, but you kind of want all your players playing well because you never know when you're going to have to count on them.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, a lot of people probably reveling in the fact that TLC isn't necessarily performing to the level that he is, but I just want all these guys, and it doesn't matter. I just like it when players play their best, whether it's on my team, whether it's on opposing teams. Basketball's just more fun to watch when you see dudes out there shooting their stuff, whether that's a TLC or whether that's a Kevin Durant.
Yeah, 100%. And teams do play well when they pass the ball. Nets 31 assists tonight, Jack, or today, whatever you want to call it.
Ben Simmons, Nick, there's only one ball. There's only one ball, Nick. What are we talking about?
Yeah, I guess he hasn't watched much tape on the Brooklyn Nets. You know, he's still kind of buying into some of those narratives. It's all about being the best defender in the NBA, Jack.
He's a 12-year-old on Twitter, Nick. It seems like the Philadelphia 76ers give the media sort of give him like a really big gas up. It's just like, where do you rank? It's like, what is it? Every second game, they're probably asking me about where he ranks himself as a defender. It's just like, my dude, basketball is about making shots as well, not about just getting steals and clamping up dudes. You know, Tony Allen is one of the 10, 15 best players ever. Joel Embiid's your best player. And without him, you guys freaking suck because you can't make a goddamn shot. One of the few Australians who I will besmirch on any public platform is Ben Simmons, Nick. And, you know, sometimes I question whether he really is Australian. Now, in all honesty, love me some Ben Simmons. Like the banter. But my dude, make a jump before you start talking trash about one of the best offensive teams in the history of this sport.
Yeah, I think post All-Star break he's been shooting really bad too. So it's like, you know, you pick the time to shoot your shots.
Yeah, or not shoot your shots if you're Ben Simmons. But I want to continue talking about some more just general Brooklyn Nets stuff, Nick, because it feels like it's been ages since we've actually podcasted, and a lot of news has built up. And Kyrie Irving's out for personal reasons. I was listening to Locked on NBA yesterday, and Anthony Irwin of the Locked on Lakers, was just losing his goddamn mind. Why is he taking off so many games for personal reasons? Why is he allowed to do this? Why can't I do this? It's just like, my dude, I'm going to lick up your tears like Cartman did with the dude's mum that he killed from Chile, because it's just like, you just so dissatisfied. Like, how does this affect you? And like, is this affecting the team in any sort of way? Like, I remember talking about, again, I hark back to preseason sort of stuff and like questions we had about this team, questions we had about the chemistry, questions we had about the locker room. None of those questions are still there. Kyrie Irving taking his time off for whatever reasons that we don't necessarily need to know. And he's criticizing the Nets media at the same time as well, which I think is just a really, really narrow-minded thing to do. In all honesty, Kyrie Irving can do what he wants. If it affects the team, that's when we start to really ask the questions about his absences. But his absences aren't affecting the team. And ultimately, we've talked about at the start of this podcast that there are things bigger than basketball. There are things bigger than basketball. This is a goddamn game. It's a sport. Who gives a shit? If he needs to take time to spend with his family, if it's for whatever other reasons that I'm sure other people have said that I'm not necessarily going to say on the podcast, who cares? The team is going fine. You don't have any sort of right to know what those personal reasons are. Plenty of other players have taken off for personal reasons. And just because he happens to be Kyrie Andrew Irving and a lightning rod for hate and criticism, it just seems to me that he's just an easy target, Nick. And while this isn't affecting the Brooklyn Nets overall, it seems to be affecting a lot of other people that it shouldn't be affecting.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are upset about it, and I really just can't understand why. I mean, if you were a Nets fan and you're complaining that you want to watch Kyrie Irving play more games, I can listen to what you're saying. Like, yeah, you want to see him on the court. Like, that's part of the game, and I get it. It can be maybe frustrating, but at the end of the day, like you said, Jack, there's things bigger than basketball. And, like, if the team is okay with it, if the players are okay, then who really cares? If we were getting leaks and it's like, Nets don't know if they can trust Kyrie Irving during the postseason, or team upset with Kyrie missing so much time, or all of these different types of leaks, then sure, I think there'd be a little bit more alarm. But given it really hasn't been that big of a deal. Like, he had that little, major break in the beginning of the season where he took off, 2 weeks of time. Like, that I can understand people maybe being upset about, and we don't really know what happened in that situation. But these last few, it's been like 1 day, 2 day. One was for the birth of his child, and this one possibly being for a religious holiday. Like, why are you upset? Like, mind your business. Like, I saw somebody tweet, and I thought this was actually made a lot of sense. Like, Karl Anthony Towns, they tweeted out why he was out today and why he missed the last 2 games, or he was going to. And that's what you need for it to be accepted. You need to have the reason. No, if Karl Anthony Towns just said he was out for personal reasons because he's upset about the passing of his mother on the 1-year anniversary, that's fine. He doesn't have to tell anybody that. You know what I mean? Like, you're allowed to be a human. That's part of who you are.
Yeah, I don't really care if anyone takes games off for personal reasons at all. I just think there's a level of I don't know if it's jealousy where it's just like they can't take off time from their own jobs, and it's just like, who cares? Like you're almost arguing, yeah, it's almost like you're almost arguing for the same rights and the same privileges that these players have. Well, it's just like that's not their problem, that's your problem, and I just don't get it. I don't understand it, Nick. It seems to be that Kyrie Irving's a very easy target, and he can take off all the time that he wants. So again, it's not affecting this team on the court. They're continuing to play really well. The only argument that I can see being made is the fact that we want there to be a level of on-court chemistry. You want to see more reps out there with KD and Kyrie and the rest of the rotation. I get that. That's the only argument. And even then, we're winning games. And, I think that the level of experience and IQ and talent that these guys have, I think the acclimation isn't really going to take long. And I don't even know if they really do need it, because there's just a level of understanding in terms of their on-court and off-court personalities that I think that they're going to gel pretty goddamn seamlessly, as they did in those 176 minutes that we were lucky enough to see them. And hopefully we do get to see some more time. Hopefully Kyrie Irving is back soon. Hopefully those personal reasons are all solved and accounted for. I don't really care what they are. Doesn't matter what they are, as long as he's happy, healthy, mentally, physically, and the rest of it, and the team is happy with it as well. Then all power to him.
And I think also, like, if it was for an illegitimate reason, like, people would be upset and the Nets would be upset, and maybe they'd fine him. Because I even remember towards the end of his, hiatus early in the year, you saw maybe a little frustration between Steve Nash and Sean Marks and stuff like that, where you're not getting that vibe at all. Like, it's a completely different situation. So like you said, Jack, just kind of mind your business.
Yeah, why does this affect you? Like, ultimately, like, just throw the energy elsewhere. Like,
and like, also, I just think it's funny is because, like, players miss time for injuries, Jack, and like, who's to know if like he's taking extra time off? Like, LeBron's out for his ankle. Like, maybe LeBron's taking an extra week off because he wants to rest before the postseason.
Nick's going some.
No, I'm just saying. I'm not saying like that's the truth, but like at the end of the day, you would never know that. But like, no one's criticizing him for being out too long and the Lakers falling in the standings. I just think it's really funny coming from a Laker fan and like, worry about your own problem. You do think that you can talk because you beat the Nets? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, and funnily enough, LeBron James in his Miami Heat era and the Cleveland era has taken time off quite consistently just to sort of reacclimate, to get a little bit of rest here and there. And I don't care either, whether it's a guy on my own team or a guy on an opposing team. I just think that it's a weird fascination to have about, especially Kyrie Irving, because it seems to me that there's a different set of rules for him than there is any other player. And
it's like also people were trying to like make him such a bad person for getting ejected.
Yeah, and sort of like, look, it's not a discussion for us to sort of have, and I'm glad kind of the heat has died down on that a little bit, because I don't necessarily feel like discussing the reasons behind it and everything that was sort of going on with that. But ultimately, like, let's just chill, man. It's Kyrie Irving. He's an easy target, but at the same time, he's also had one of the best seasons of his goddamn career. So maybe it kind of works. I don't know.
Maybe talk about that a little too.
Yeah, maybe. The energy is never the same positively as it is negatively, Nick. It never is. And I think that I've been probably guilty of that in terms of other players and whatever. But I think this season and this year and the past 18, 24 months has sort of taught me to keep that positive vibes going. And we're lucky to be pretty positive because the Nets continue to win games. Kyrie Irving's playing incredible basketball. And Kevin Durant is absolutely sunning fools on Twitter, be it Shannon Sharp or whoever the hell else you are. That was goddamn glorious.
Yeah, like I said before, he's dropping people on Twitter, dropping people on the court. But I think also today was like one of the rare days where you saw like almost the entire like Twitterverse like, oh yeah, this is a dub for KD. Because like what Shannon Sharp's argument was just kind of ridiculous in the sense he used a fake quote, didn't take accountability for it, and then told KD we can talk about it not in the public eye, but I'm going to talk shit about you in the public eye first.
And he blocked him, Nick. He blocked him. And someone added him on Twitter, said, why you block KD? That's not gangster. And Shannon Sharp responded with, I'm not gangster, but I'm not going back and forth with KD and lose my job either. I've had disagreement with other athletes, people before. We handled like adults and moved on like adults. Okay, the adult thing to be here, Shannon, would be to take, we spoke about accountability in a much more important fashion at the start of this podcast, but take accountability and say, I was wrong. Yeah. I effed up. I took the quote out of context. I was wrong. KD, I'm sorry. Let's move on. Let's get the energy elsewhere. But this is good for these Stephen A. Smith, Skip Bayless, Shannon Sharps of the world. This Twitter traction, this social media traction, this Michael Rappaport crying about walking his dog and going to coffee shops or whatever. It's great for them. They salivate over this.
I can't even figure out if that is real or not. Like, I still can't.
He's a goddamn clown. I'm not going to say his name ever again. It's going to be like mispronouncing Tillman Furtado. I'm going to keep mispronouncing Michael Rappaport. But Shannon Sharp, the Sharp man, he wasn't too sharp today. Katie was certainly very sharp and on his Twitter and on the court. But it ultimately, Nick, it's an easy solution. Shannon Sharp, say you were wrong. Take accountability for the misconstruing something that was a fake quote from a goddamn dumb Twitter 12-year-old account, like something that Ben Simmons takes out of context. Because they're like, stupidity can be solved from accountability sometimes, Nick. And I think that it's better for his brand and the general brand on whatever network he's on. I deliberately haven't interacted with them on Twitter because it's exactly what they want and need. But I'll talk about it because it's a fun sort of talking point on a podcast. So it's just is it that easy to say you're wrong, Nick? Look, I've been how many things have I been wrong?
You don't even have to say you're wrong. You could just say that somebody gave you the wrong quote and that it's false information. Like, it doesn't even have to take full accountability. You could just be like, oh yeah, somebody on my team gave that to me. My bad, KD. I thought it was real. Like,
I don't get it, Nick. I don't get it. Shannon Sharp is maybe not the sharpest tool in the shed.
He's got a lot of LeBron in his mouth, so it's just
It's easy. It's just easy for like the brand. Maybe I've never sort of said that I want Skip Bayless to put someone in their place, but maybe he can do that. But ultimately, the Kevin Durant continuing to be an absolute flamethrower. It's not his best moment on Twitter this season. We all know that his best moment on Twitter came when he was shut down and Adam Silver locked him out, and I tweeted that we would save him as Nets fan. That will still remain his best Twitter moment in the history of Kevin Durant's Twitter pages and burners and Instagrams or whatever. But yeah, Shannon Sharp, man, come on, man. Like, it's a pretty easy solution. Just
especially a former athlete.
Yeah, and he's acting like he's completely just changing his tackle on the way and changing the narrative to sort of fit his own sort of biases, as a lot of us tend to do. But sometimes objectivity isn't a bad thing either. Especially
on those shows, but you don't find much of that. But Jack, anything else you want to touch on the Nets front before we get out of here?
Look, it's going to all turn around in 24 hours, Nick. I think we'll probably have new talking points to talk about on and off the court. Will Kyrie Irving play the bubble Nets or whatever? So make sure you listen to this one, subscribing, because there's episodes dropping on a game-by-game basis on the Brooklyn Buzz.
Jack, initial reaction, does Kevin Durant play tomorrow?
No. You?
No. Sadly, I really wanted to say yes to make people happy. I wouldn't be shocked, but I'd give it something under 25%.
Do you agree with the decision by Steve Nash to play him? Like, everyone's just like, they're up by 30. Why are you still playing him? But then we heard in the game beforehand, it was just like, we need to get Kevin Durant these minutes so he can get his conditioning back. What are your thoughts? Would you have rather him played like 20 minutes? The Nets were up by like 40 or whatever at one point, and then we do get some semblance or some slim chance of an opportunity? Or do you agree with this plan in terms of getting Kevin Durant back to full health?
I think it's like, honestly, apples and oranges. Like, playing a minute amount in a game and then playing in a game the next day is not the same thing. You know what I mean? If I'm playing 40 minutes of basketball and I'm playing one game and I'm playing 20 minutes today and 20 minutes tomorrow, my body's going to react in a completely different way. So I feel like today was more about the ramp up and getting up to that 30-minute mark or close to it and getting him ready. If they're going to play in the back-to-back, I don't think it necessarily mattered. If KD came out and played like 47 minutes today, then you'd lock no back-to-back for sure. But I think like they already had an idea in their head and what they wanted to do.
It's the big picture at the end of the day,
yep.
Nick. And despite the fact that we might not get the 1 seed and this match, this game against the Sixers does matter maybe more than any other. And again, it would have been fun if we had had all the guys fully healthy, and because a lot of the sort of marquee matchups we've been sort of robbed of, against the Jazz, against the Lakers, all these sort of teams, and other teams as well have lacked the availability of their superstars. So it does suck. So we'll wait and see. I think it's probably even lower than 25% chance. I'll probably give it like a 15% chance. You have no doubt that Kevin Durant will want to play, but the bigger picture is what matters. And we need him playing back-to-back games, 45 minutes plus, 40 minutes plus in the postseason. And if that means we rest him this random game in the regular season, I think all is going to be forgotten after that. But yeah, it's ultimately the bigger picture is what matters, Nick, and that's all I really care about.
Exactly. And you don't necessarily want him to overexert himself if Kyrie Irving's not playing too, like trying to get this win against a very good Philadelphia 76ers team. But Jack, always a pleasure. Big thanks everybody for listening, and check the Buzz on all streaming platforms.